Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Supporter Spotlight number 39. And the theme of today's video is going to be the Germans, and that's not really intentional, it's just I knew who I was going to be featuring today, and when I was looking through the replays it just so happened that it was going to be 3 German machines. So we're going to start off with the E50, and it's got rather a long gun. That's a very long gun, in fact. Yes, this is the 88mm L100, which has been available on the E50 for I don't know how long, but it's just a gun you've never really ever seen used because there's been no point to using it. It was basically a hipster gun. It had really no particular advantage over the 10.5. The 10.5 was absolutely the gun to use on this machine. But with the most recent patch, well, this, along with a whole host of other German tanks, and just tanks generally, got some quite nice buffs. And this gun is now not just viable, almost maybe preferable, because in terms of penetration stats, it's always been somewhat comparable. In fact, I think it's very slightly better than the 10.5, but it had basically, I think, worse handling and worse DPM, so there was just no reason to use it whatsoever. Now, though, with the buffs it's had, the DPM is very good. You can get it to well over 3,000. So you're left now with the choice of a high DPM but relatively low alpha gun. You know, it's an 88mm, it only has 240 alpha. Or you can have a much lower DPM but a much higher punch with the 10.5, and it's 390 alpha. So it makes for an interesting choice, and I think overall you're going to be seeing this gun a lot more on the battlefield just because it is now so good with that DPM and that it isn't particularly hindered by its other stats. And it's nice when you have a genuine choice of guns on a tank, because there are relatively few tanks in the game that truly do. Sometimes Wargaming tries to do what they famously, or perhaps infamously, did with the T-54, where they made one gun with low penetration but good handling, and then one with better handling, but I can't remember what the other downside to that was. But yeah, people just went with the good handling and fired heat all the time, and that's how the infamous Heat 54 was born. So yeah, Wargaming a lot of the time when they're trying to come up with these things just don't take into account the fact that, oh yeah, people can press the 2 key and load premium ammo, but that doesn't really pertain to this particular gun because in terms of penetration they're both about the same. So if you want that high DPM kind of playstyle, then absolutely use this gun. It is 100% viable, more than viable these days. So this hasn't been a like super exciting game or anything. It's actually been quite a short game, in fact. Game Glitch himself, in his email, admitted it wasn't anything particularly spectacular, but he thought it might be interesting to see this new, improved weapon in action. It's not new, but it's just, you know, there's never really been a point to using it up until now. And if you're interested, I swear, I think there is an older replay of my own in the E50 where I was using this gun before it was buffed, and you can maybe get some sense of what it's like, what it used to be like, rather. But these days, yes, it's a very, very good weapon indeed. So just takes the kill on that batch at 55-58. I mean, this enemy team collapsed pretty damn hard. They've only lost 2 tanks, an artillery and an IS-7. And, well, the enemy team is now down to just this RU, so, yeah, that's that, really. Oh, managed to derp a bunch of his own health off, and his platoon mate got the final kill. So that was 3,200, only worth a second class because it was just damaged. There wasn't any spotting or assistance in there, and although a bunch of it was against higher tier machines, that didn't really translate that much into XP. I mean, he's still top of the team. 1,003 is pretty respectable, but it's nothing spectacular. I think the fact that nobody in his team did particularly well XP wise, I mean, there was a real spread around 600 and 700 XP. It's just because the enemy team folded so fast and the damage was comparatively spread around. So yeah, so there you go. There's probably another advantage to this gun, actually, over the 10.5 is the 88mm ammo is fairly cheap, so that's another reason to maybe use it. Talking of 88mm guns, this is Seralis, who is a new Patreon supporter, and this is the Krupp-Steyr Waffenträger, which is basically a ride-on lawnmower with a long 88. Not the long 88, the comedy 88. No, this is the regular long 88. Yeah, we need a new parlance. We need a new designation for that gun, really, don't we? This is another machine that was the recipient, that's a word, definitely, of buffs. It wasn't anything huge. I mean, it's still not particularly fast, and the gun was untouched, but it did get a beefier engine, and so therefore much better horsepower per ton, because previously it was not particularly great. It was rather lackluster. I mean, it's a tank destroyer with a turret, which is a plus, but with a top speed of, I think, 35 kilometers an hour and a pretty poor horsepower per ton ratio, yeah, nobody was ever particularly excited by it, and in fact I'm guessing one of the reasons why it got buffed is it probably didn't sell all that well. So it's still not any faster, but it gets around the place a lot better now that it isn't hampered by having the engine of a ride-on lawnmower. It did get quite a considerable upgrade. I mean, it was, what, 100 and something horsepower, and it's gone up to 200 and something horsepower, so I don't think it quite doubled, but it can't have been that far off. It got something like 75-80% more engine power. So, you know, enough to make a noticeable difference. So, this particular map, Highway, it's unfolding in a rather unusual way, because the enemy top tiers have chosen to go on the 1-2 line. And, well, both teams, I'm not going to say they're tank destroyer heavy, but they have rather a lot of tank destroyers towards the top of the team list, shall we say. There's one other oddity as well, in that their own team has a Bishop, a tier 5 artillery, and the enemy team has an S51. Yeah, Matchmaker wasn't so much drunk there as completely smashed and passed out in the gutter. Tier 5 RT on one team and a tier 7 on the other. I have no idea. I don't know, maybe this was a match that was played really late at night and it was struggling to find enough people to pull in from the matchmaking list, but still, tier 5 on one side and a tier 7 on the other. Well done. So, the team that pushed over west the 1-2 line have been unfortunately slaughtered by the combination of the fact that it's both the enemy top tier heavies plus that S51 plus all the tank destroyers. And what that means, of course, in the southeast corner, down in the town, is that, well, the teammates that went down there didn't really meet a lot of opposition because there wasn't a lot of the enemy team there. So they're kind of doing the same thing as each other, both these teams. It's two groups of tank destroyers camping at their bases, and then you've got the top tier tanks just kind of sat on the opposite corner of the map from those bases, waiting to make a move. So the T-67 has the speed, dashes forward to spot for all these tank destroyers, because otherwise they're just going to be sat there waiting. And it's this T-67 spotting that's letting them get the damage, because on the south flank, well, what happened, it wasn't somebody rushing forward to spot, it was their team pushing forward over the open and getting taken to bits. So it's not looking so good. Seralis, meanwhile, he's basically just been sat in this bush, which is what you do in a fragile tank destroyer. A lot of the times there's very little scope for going forward and being gung-ho because it would just be suicidal. Now, despite his somewhat iffy shooting, he's still managed to get 2.3k damage, so that's not too bad. But yeah, he really does need to work on his shooting a bit. He's clearly got a decent knowledge of weak spots, though. When he had that Tiger P to shoot at, he was quite carefully trying to aim at the bits of armour that he knew would be weaker, rather than pinging off the front armour, which at this distance with this gun would just bounce. Unless he got very lucky with a pen roll or something. So the T-67 is continuing to try and spot. The Nassau now moves up as well, which I think's actually got a reasonable turn of speed in a straight line, the Nashorn. Some of the tank destroyers do. Some of the Soviet ones as well, you know, you point them in a straight line and make them go, and they're not too bad. It's when you have to try and turn to deal with people that suddenly the mobility starts to fall down a bit. So that's the Tiger P down alongside the enemy IS, but there are still plenty of enemy tank destroyers left alive. In fact, most of the enemy tank destroyers. I've only got one arty and a T-34 besides, so that's that Su-100M1 dealt with. The Panzer IV now gets spotted, and as for the rest, we know where they were. They were down towards their own base, so they could well be pushing up towards this side now, because they've probably got a very good idea that this is where the remaining members of Sir Alice's team are. And the T-67 gets taken out by the Panzer IV, who undoubtedly has the short 88, which is more than good enough for dealing with tanks with this level of armour. And if the Nashorn can land a hit, he can maybe take this guy out, but he's taking damage himself. Of course, there's still, oh, there we go, still artillery. And artillery loves a thinly armoured tank destroyer. So the Panzer IV did get taken out, but so did that Nashorn. And now Sir Alice has very few allies left indeed. And he's got to be cautious himself here. He's got to be stealthy, because he could easily be obliterated by the S-51. I can't get over that. I just can't. The fact that the enemy team got a tier 7 arty and they got a tier 5. Matchmaker was not only passed out drunk in the gutter, but it had like a heroin needle sticking out of its arm as well or something. I don't know. Anyway, wow, there's some imagery for you. So, he's very cautiously moving from bush to bush. He's using his binoculars and camo to try and outspot anybody that might be spotting him. And the good news here is that of the tanks facing him, none of them have a very good view range. I mean, the S-51 is unlikely to be on the front lines anyway, but yeah, the Su-100, the T-34 and the Stug, of those three, it's probably the T-34 that's got the best view range. And obviously there's always differing equipment loadouts to take into account, but even so, yeah, the Su-100 and the Stug are pretty blind all in all. So the Sturdy Mill has, to Sir Alice's east, moved to the mid-ridge area where the titular highway crosses the stream, and the VKM is actually coming up now behind Sir Alice, and he's survived the massacre in the town. He was the only one that, they just lost the S-51, lost the Stuart Emil to the S-51, anyway. So yeah, the VK is the only one that survived the massacre in the town and came back towards the cap, and it's maybe that it's either sensible caution or else a bit too much caution. Now, when in the case of, you know, charging over the field towards tank destroyers, sensible caution definitely, but at this point maybe he's been a bit too cautious. Now, Sir Alice has been spotted by the Stug once he fired. Fortunately, the Stug only landed one hit in, and although it was bound to penetrate, he can take that hit at least. But of course, the artillery now knows he's here. And I think Sir Alice was banking on this house being next to him to save him, because although it's destructible, it would eat an arty shell. So then the Su-100 turns up, and there's good news and bad news. He's got the 85mm gun, which means he does less damage per shot, but it also means the bad news is that he fires much faster. So Sir Alice takes 2 hits instead of the 1 that he might have expected to take from the 122. And if it had been the 122 with HE, it could have possibly just blatted him outright. So I'm not sure what, yeah, this VK, I mean, he's lost his commander now. And so he's going to have a hard time spotting anything, but it's just artillery. And you can kind of guess where artillery is going to be on this map. But the VK should really be taking the lead, and instead he's content to let Sir Alice drive forward. So, yeah, I'm going to temper my praise of this VK. Yes, he's managed to survive till this point, but he's not really playing to the situation, given that the tank he's in. And it's Sir Alice that actually gets the spot on the artillery, although fortunately the VK's shot takes him in the tracks, so he has that moment of having to repair. So the S-51 just snaps a shot, completely misses. Sir Alice gets the kill, and that ends the match. So the first part was a bit boring, dare I say it, because he was just sat in a bush for large parts of it. But then he got rather tense towards the end, and he was able to play sensibly enough and have a good enough tactical awareness to actually hoover up quite a lot of damage overall and basically bring that to be a successful outcome. So that was his ace tanker, 3.6k damage done, 1300 base XP. VK was third on the team, but you look at his result and you think, yeah, okay, stayed alive, but maybe not the best player. And with the final scores, or the final screen where we can see nice profit, but yeah, he needs to work on his shooting. 29 shots fired, 22 hits, 18 pens. So he was maybe a little fast and loose with his firing at times. But you know, knowing these things is useful. It's areas you can work on, and that's always a thing that's useful, particularly about replays in World of Tanks. Is you can look back and you can say, okay, now I'm out of the heat of battle. I can see that I could do this better, or I could do that better. Anyway, so, last game, and we've gone from one lawnmower to another. Although this one more, it's that it sounds like a lawnmower. It's the SP1C, the Spähpanzer at tier 7. Which is a funny boxy looking little tank. And although it's not one that... I don't know, there might be people out there that really love this machine, but I've not seen huge amounts of praise heaped on it overall, but it does seem like it can be quite capable, and certainly more so than something like the 1375. Now, Island Man here, he's got the 3-round autoloader, and it's a 3-round 90mm autoloader. So the upside is, with those 3 rounds in the clip, you can do a reasonable amount of damage. The downside is, though, it's a little bit like the French autoloaders in that he's got a reasonably limited stock of ammo, although still more than the 1390 gets. That's limited to, 30 rounds, and this has 30-something total. So, yes, you might almost even say this is probably better than the 1390, although I'd have to compare the stats directly, but it's certainly better in a lot of ways than the 1375. So he could have fired there, but one of the things you'll notice about this game is he exerts really good trigger discipline. He doesn't waste shells on shots that he knows are probably not going to work. Whereas a tank with more ammo, you might chance it and give it a go. But it's twofold in this case. It's because he doesn't have a lot of ammo, and also because he's in a light tank and he doesn't have a lot of hit points, so he's got to be cautious. So he's just firing at targets of opportunity at the moment. He could be whizzing around and trying to spot things, but there's not a huge amount of points when it's an encounter game. I almost said a standard game, but it's not. It's an encounter. My brain's just trying to trick me, as it usually does, into saying the wrong thing. So instead, he's tried to do a little bit of spotting, and he's managed to get some spotting assistance damage already. I think he tracked that M41 Bulldog. So between that and other spotting, he's already got nearly 1600 spotting damage. And although this is maybe not an ideal map for scouting overall, he's still going to walk away from this match with actually quite a good proportion of spotting and assistance. But I'd have to go and tote up what the difference is between the spotting and the assistance, because a fair bit of it is going to be assistance damage from tracking people. So this is what I mean: trigger discipline. Shot into the side of the Super Pershing at this range, okay, takes the chance and it goes in, but the moment the armour turns round, well, okay, let's not bother, that's just going to be a waste. So there's a heavy concentration of tanks over by the cap, as we can see. There's a couple on the ridge towards the northwest, and then here we can see his own allies are being hard pressed by the enemy, and Iron Man decides to try and help. Now this is not ideal for this tank, absolutely not, especially as that's a Torty and an Oho, both of which have armour that he might struggle with if he doesn't get a chance to flank, or in the case of the Torty, sit and aim for weak spots. But otherwise, you know, the KV-3 certainly he can do a lot of damage against. because the 180 base pen on this is more than good enough for that. Yo-Ho, by the way, I think when he pulled out to shoot the KB3 the first time, and he's going to get the kill. Oh, he doesn't actually. Oh well. I thought he might, but somebody else just sneaks it. What was I saying? Oh yeah, well, the first time he pulled out, there was a danger there actually that the Yo-Ho could have shot him, and I think he kind of maybe realised that in retrospect, but it worked out. It's fine, and with his assistance, they're actually turning this around. So the Tiger 2 and the Super Pershing have really held on very well here. So he gets the flank, gets the side armour, is able to clip the Yo-Ho and spare the Super Pershing from taking any more damage. I think that's the only real hasty snapshot he takes in the entire game, where he uses the final shell of the clip to maybe try and get a hit into the ST-1's side armour. And by the time he's reloaded well, the ST-1's actually now starting to turn, so although he gets the track, which is going to mean potentially more assistance damage, if he wants more damage himself out of this guy, it's going to be very tricky. Now you'll note he doesn't have any HE, and this is just standard HE on this tank. It doesn't have the high penetration that the Spähpanzer RU-251 has. So given that the chances of needing a clip of HE and having to load a clip of HE are probably relatively minimal, I can see why he's opted to go without, and also it's taking away from your regular ammo. So he loads a heat shell for the final bit of health on the ST, and decides rather than reload and conserve the remaining heat just to have a go. Misses one into the M4190 and then actually hits the third, but the tracks absorb it, I guess, and he doesn't even get the tracking shot out of that. So it looked to be fairly even by the cap for a long while, but the tide is really... well, I don't want to be too declarative there actually and say, oh, it's really turned in the enemy team's favour. No, they've taken huge losses, but they've also overcome Sorales' team, so they have gotten the upper hand, but it's been at a big cost. And of Sorales' remaining teammates, it's just that Super Pershing. So 2 versus 3. And chances are the UDES and the ISU 122S, which is the tier 7 with the 122 millimeter even, they're probably full health. And there's the UDES. Now, he gave the game away by going through the cap there. I think he was hoping to maybe flank the T-34, but the UDES just decides to go for it. Because it's only a little SP-1C, right? And the UDES has got a big gun, right? So how dangerous can this be? Surely he'll be fine. He'll kill Island Man, they'll kill the Super Pershing, and I'll be fine. Well, in his overconfidence, the UDES has made a bit of an elementary mistake. He forgot he doesn't have a turret. And although he does look like he's just about ready to get another shot off, it comes too late because Island Man was able to keep behind him long enough to get the reload and then just finish him off with another clip. So much for the overconfidence of the UDES. So with that kill, I think that really tips things back in their favour, because it was a dangerous situation. If the T-34 had come along there as well as the UDES, Island Man would be dead now. And as it is, with the T-34 having stayed in the cap, well, Island Man was able to survive because the UDES didn't have a turret. And so the T-34 is now isolated and alone in the cap. Now the Super Pershing, who had a dead driver, who took a while to get here, managed to put in a couple of shots, and it looked like Island Man might get a 2-shot kill there, but alas, RNG said no, so he had to use his final shot from that clip. And while he was zooming over here to the cap, he actually spotted the ISU 122S moving in as well, but didn't get spotted in return, because that thing doesn't have particularly good view range. So that's the game, really, and I have to say, the Super Pershing in particular also did play pretty well in this one, probably more so than most of the tier 9s on each side. So without that guy's help, without that guy being here, I think Island Man might still have managed this, but it would have been a lot more difficult. And if that T-34 hadn't made the fatal decision to stay in the cap instead of helping his teammates, you know, this probably would have gone in the enemy team's favour. So Alan Mann just waited until the Super Pershing basically baited the 122S and took the kill and got an ace tanker out of it. Now, as you can see, a pretty good result there. 2,000 spotting assistance, in fact 2,100, and 4,100 damage done himself with 6 kills for a total of 1,760 base XP. And he actually said in his email, this is his best XP game to date. And it was a pretty damn good one. And I think it was a very good example of a very well played light tank game, especially when it came to the shot discipline, because he held his fire for those things that he knew he could penetrate. And there was literally one shell that was a hasty snapshot, and the rest were all really quite carefully considered. So overall, yes, I think that was quite a nice counterpoint to the previous game. I mean, the previous game was pretty good as well, but it was rather more static for a lot of it. Whereas this, not so much. So hopefully you've enjoyed this trio of German machines, and if you have, you can leave any comments below. You can hit that like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.